Colorado Territory, 1876. The gunshot ripped through the howling blizzard, echoing across the snow-covered hills. Rhett Morgan's breath frosted in the bitter air as he steadied the long rifle against his shoulder, his weathered face pressed against the cold stock. Through the swirling white, he could make out the dark shapes of wolves circling a smaller figure on the edge of his property. Beside him, 4-year-old Ellie trembled, her small hand clutching his coat sleeve. Her face was pale beneath her woolen cap, but her eyes, her mother's eyes, were fixed on the scene below. "Shoot, Papa," she whispered. Rhett's finger tightened on the trigger. The lead wolf lunged forward, and in that same instant, Rhett squeezed. The rifle kicked against his shoulder, the sound swallowed by the wind. The wolf dropped, and the pack scattered momentarily before regrouping, their hunger overriding their fear. Rhett worked the lever action smoothly, chambering another round. 3 more shots in quick succession, 3 more wolves down. The rest slunk away into the swirling snow, defeated. Only then did Rhett truly see what the wolves had been circling. Not a wounded deer, as he'd first supposed, but a woman. She stood with her back against a lightning-struck pine, a small revolver clutched in her shaking hand. Wrapped against her chest was a bundle that Rhett immediately recognized as an infant. "Stay here," he told Ellie, tucking the rifle under his arm. "No," her small voice was surprisingly firm. "I'm coming too." He hesitated, then nodded once. "Stay close." They made their way down the slope, the snow crunching beneath their boots. As they approached, the woman raised her revolver, her eyes wild with fear and exhaustion. "Stay back," she warned, her voice hoarse but steady. Rhett stopped, raising his empty hands. "Ma'am, we mean no harm. You're on my land. My daughter and I heard the wolves." The woman's gaze flickered to Ellie, then back to Rhett. Something in her posture eased slightly, but she didn't lower the gun. "You're bleeding," Ellie said, suddenly pointing to a dark stain spreading across the woman's skirt. Rhett saw it too, blood seeping through the heavy fabric at her thigh. One of the wolves must have gotten to her before he'd intervened. "We have shelter," he said. "Food, warmth. That little one won't survive the night out here." The woman's resolve wavered. The bundle against her chest stirred, and a weak cry emerged. The sound seemed to break something in her, and the revolver lowered slowly. "Please," she whispered. "Help my son." Rhett nodded and stepped forward, offering his arm. She hesitated only a moment before accepting it, her legs nearly buckling as she shifted her weight. As they began the trudge back toward the distant lights of the Morgan homestead, Ellie moved closer to the woman, her small face curious. She leaned in, sniffing slightly, then looked up at her father with wide eyes. "Papa," she said, "she smells like Mama." The words hit Rhett like a physical blow. Ellie hadn't spoken of her mother in over 2 years, not since the funeral. Not since they'd laid Catherine in the cold ground beneath the cottonwood tree. The woman glanced at him, confusion and something like sympathy crossing her exhausted features. "I'm sorry," she murmured. "Don't be," Rhett replied, his voice rough. "Come on, storm's getting worse." By the time they reached the 2-story homestead, the woman was leaning heavily against him, the infant's cries growing more insistent. Inside, the warmth of the fire hit them like a wall after the bitter cold. Rhett helped the woman to the chair nearest the hearth, while Ellie scurried to add another log to the flames. "I'm Willa," the woman said finally, unwrapping the bundle to reveal a red-faced infant boy, perhaps 8 months old. "Willa Hart. This is Jonah." "Rhett Morgan. My daughter Ellie." Rhett hung his coat by the door, his eyes taking in the details he'd missed in the storm. Willa Hart was young, mid-20s at most, with dark blonde hair escaping a once neat bun. Her clothes were travel-worn, but of good quality. A lady's clothes, not a farmer's wife. The revolver she'd been carrying was tucked into her belt, a small derringer, hardly enough to stop a determined wolf. "You're hurt," he said, nodding toward her leg. "It's not deep," she replied, but the pallor of her skin told a different story. "Papa can fix it," Ellie said confidently. "He fixes everything." A ghost of a smile touched Willa's lips. "I'm sure he does." Rhett moved toward a cabinet, retrieving a worn medical kit. Ellie fetched some clean towels and water, then ready the guest room upstairs. As Ellie scurried away, Rhett turned back to find Willa watching him with wary eyes. "I don't want to impose," she said softly. "We can leave at first light." Rhett knelt beside her chair, opening the medical kit. "Ma'am, there's 3 feet of snow out there and more coming. Nobody's going anywhere for at least 2 days." He paused. "That is, unless you've got someone looking for you." Something flickered in her eyes, fear Rhett realized. "No," she said. "No one's looking." He didn't believe her for a second, but he nodded anyway. "Then you'll stay until the storm passes and the road's clear." His tone left no room for argument. "Now, let me see that leg." Willa hesitated, then shifted her skirt to reveal the tear in her petticoat and the jagged wound beneath. Rhett worked in silence, cleaning and bandaging with practiced efficiency. As a former Confederate scout, he'd seen and treated far worse in the field. "You've done this before," Willa observed, wincing slightly as he tightened the bandage. "War teaches a man many things," Rhett replied simply. "The war between the states." He nodded once, not elaborating. Those were memories he kept buried deep. Ellie returned with towels and a basin of water, her small face serious as she assisted her father. When they finished, Rhett stood gathering the bloodied cloths. "You need rest," he told Willa. "Both of you. Ellie will show you upstairs." "Thank you," Willa said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We would have died out there." Rhett met her gaze directly. "Why were you out there in the first place? Mrs. Hart's nearest town is Silverhorn, 15 miles east. Nobody travels these hills in winter without good reason." Willa looked down at Jonah now, sleeping peacefully in her arms. "I was running," she admitted. "From my husband." "He hurt you?" "Yes." The simple word carried the weight of countless unspoken horrors. Rhett's jaw tightened. "He won't find you here," he said. "Not tonight, at least." After Willa and Jonah were settled upstairs, Rhett stood at the window watching the storm rage outside. The snow had obliterated their tracks already, but something told him it wouldn't matter. Men who hunted women had ways of finding them. He moved to the cabinet beneath the stairs, unlocking it to reveal a collection of weapons reminders of a past he'd tried to leave behind. He selected a Winchester repeating rifle, checking its action before loading it fully. "Papa?" Ellie's voice came from the stairway. She stood in her nightgown, her dark hair loose around her shoulders. "Is she an angel?" Rhett frowned. "What makes you ask that?" "Mrs. Willa. She smells like Mama. Maybe Mama sent her to us." Rhett set the rifle aside and knelt before his daughter. "No, sweetheart. She's just a lady who needed help. Like the book says, be not forgetful to entertain strangers." Ellie considered this, then nodded solemnly. "Her baby is very small." "Yes, he is. Can they stay? Not just until the storm goes. Forever." Rhett sighed, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "It's not that simple, Ellie girl. Mrs. Hart has her own life, her own path. But she's afraid. I saw it in her eyes, like the rabbits when the foxes come." Out of the mouths of babes, Rhett thought grimly. "That's why we're helping her. Now, back to bed with you." After tucking Ellie in, Rhett made a final check of the house. At the guest room door, he paused, listening. All was quiet. Willa and her son were sleeping. Outside, the wind howled like a living thing, rattling the windows. Rhett returned downstairs, stoked the fire, and settled into the chair nearest the door, the Winchester across his lap. He would not sleep tonight. Just before dawn, as the storm began to ease, Rhett's vigilance was rewarded. A sound outside, not the wind, but the soft crunch of snow beneath boots. Moving silently, he positioned himself by the window, peering through a gap in the curtains. A dark figure moved along the edge of the property, pausing to study the house. Even in the dim light, Rhett could make out the revolver at the man's hip and the rifle slung across his back. The stranger circled toward the barn, his movements purposeful, searching. Rhett watched his body tense, ready. The man spent nearly 20 minutes examining the property before disappearing back into the tree line. Only when he was certain the stranger was gone did Rhett allow himself to exhale. On the porch where the stranger had stood, Rhett found a single item left behind a kerchief partially buried in the snow. He picked it up, turning it over in his gloved hands. Embroidered in one corner was a simple design, a snake coiled to strike. Rhett didn't sleep. He spent the remainder of the night moving between windows, watching the property for any sign of the visitor's return. None came, but his instincts, honed by years of scouting behind enemy lines, told him this was only the beginning. At first light, he made a careful circuit of the homestead. The snow had stopped, leaving a pristine blanket covering the land, broken only by the tracks of the night visitor and several others Rhett discovered. At least 3 men had observed the house from different positions. Inside, he found Willa already awake, standing at the kitchen stove, with Jonah balanced on her hip. The smell of coffee filled the air. "Hope you don't mind," she said, gesturing to the pot. "Seemed the least I could do." "Obliged," Rhett replied, hanging his coat. He accepted the cup she offered, studying her in the morning light. The rest had done her good. Some color had returned to her cheeks, and her eyes were clearer, alert. "Your leg? Better, thank you." She hesitated. "Mr. Morgan, about what I said last night." "Had visitors," Rhett interrupted, setting his cup down. 3, maybe 4 men. Circled the property before dawn. Willa went very still, her face draining of color. Did you see them clearly?" "Just one. Left this." He produced the kerchief, watching her reaction carefully. She didn't need to touch it. The color drained from her face at the sight of the snake emblem. "The snakes," she whispered. "They found us." "Your husband's men," Willa nodded, clutching Jonah tighter. "Emery Tate. He leads them." The name struck Rhett like a physical blow. Emery Tate was known throughout the Colorado Territory, and beyond, a gunslinger turned outlaw who led one of the most notorious gangs in the West. The Snakes specialized in coach robberies and ranch raids, leaving few survivors. 3 months ago, they'd murdered a federal judge in Denver. "You're Emery Tate's wife." Rhett kept his voice neutral, but his mind was racing, reassessing everything. "I was," Willa replied, her chin lifting slightly. "I left when I learned what kind of man he truly is. When I found out I was carrying Jonah, I thought he might change." She laughed bitterly. "He didn't. He got worse." "So you ran." "When Jonah was 2 months old. We've been running ever since." Her eyes met his defiant despite her fear. "Judge me if you will, Mr. Morgan, but I won't apologize for protecting my son." "Not judging," Rhett said quietly. "But this changes things. Tate isn't a man who forgives being left." "I know." Willa sat heavily at the table, the weight of her situation evident in every line of her body. "We'll leave as soon as possible. I won't bring this danger to your home, to your daughter." Before Rhett could respond, Small footsteps pattered down the stairs, and Ellie appeared, her face brightening at the sight of Willa and Jonah. "You're still here," she exclaimed. "Good morning, Miss Ellie." Willa smiled, though it didn't reach her eyes. "Papa, can I hold the baby?" Rhett glanced at Willa, who nodded. "Sit in the big chair," she instructed. "Hold your arms just so." Ellie followed directions perfectly, her small face solemn with responsibility, as Willa placed Jonah in her arms. The baby regarded her with curious eyes before breaking into a toothless smile that made Ellie giggle with delight. Watching them, Rhett felt something shift inside him, a protective instinct that extended beyond his daughter to include this woman and her child. It was a complication he hadn't anticipated and didn't particularly welcome. "Mrs. Hart," he said finally, "I need to see what you can do with this." He placed his Remington revolver on the table. Willa looked up in surprise. "I beg your pardon. If Tate's men come when they come, I need to know you can defend yourself and the children, if necessary." Understanding dawned in her eyes. She gently reclaimed Jonah from Ellie, settled him in a makeshift cradle fashioned from a drawer, then picked up the revolver. Her handling was immediately confident, checking the cylinder and action with practiced ease. "My father was an artillery officer," she explained, seeing Rhett's raised eyebrow. "He believed every woman should know how to handle a firearm." She glanced toward the window. "Is there somewhere I can demonstrate without wasting your ammunition?" 20 minutes later, in the shelter of the barn, Rhett watched with growing respect as Willa put 6 shots into a hay bale at 20 paces, grouping them tightly enough that he could cover the pattern with his hand. "Your father taught you well," he acknowledged. "He taught me many things," Willa replied, reloading smoothly. "Reading, writing, mathematics. He had no sons, you see, and believed daughters deserved education too." Unusual view. He was an unusual man. A shadow crossed her face. "He died when I was 16. Gambling debts. My uncle arranged my marriage to Emery to settle them." "You were sold," Rhett said bluntly. Willa flinched slightly, then nodded. "In all but name, yes. I was young, naive. Emery was charming at first, generous. By the time I understood what he was—" She trailed off, then squared her shoulders. "Well, here we are." Rhett studied her for a long moment. "You can stay," he said finally, "until we figure something more permanent." Hope flashed in her eyes, quickly tempered by caution. "Mr. Morgan, you don't understand the risk. Emery won't stop. He'll burn this place to the ground to get what he wants." "I understand risk better than most, Mrs. Hart." Rhett's voice took on a harder edge. "I wasn't always a rancher. During the war, I served as a scout for the Confederate Army. The Yankees called me the Carolina Ghost." Recognition flickered in Willa's eyes. Even now, 11 years after Appomattox, that name carried weight. The Carolina Ghost, the scout and sharpshooter credited with 32 confirmed kills of Union officers, including 2 generals. A phantom who moved unseen behind enemy lines, who was never caught, despite the considerable bounty on his head. "You fought for the South," she said softly. "I fought for Virginia," he corrected. "For home, not for slavery or secession or any of the politicians' grand ideas." He looked away. "War has a way of stripping men down to what they truly are. I discovered I was good at killing. Too good." "Is that why you're here, so far from Carolina?" Rhett nodded once. "After the surrender, there wasn't much left for men like me back east. Too many ghosts." He paused. "Catherine, my wife, she believed we could start fresh here. Build something good." "I'm sorry," Willa said, "for your loss." A silence fell between them, filled with the weight of their separate pasts. "The conditions," Rhett said finally. "If you stay, you work. Cooking, cleaning, helping with Ellie. I can't pay much, but you'll have room and board for you and your boy. That's more than fair." "Tell me everything about Tate. His men, his methods, his weaknesses. If he's coming for you, I need to know what we're facing." Willa hesitated, then nodded. "Agreed. One more thing." Rhett met her eyes directly. "No lies between us, not even small ones. I need to trust you, Mrs. Hart." "Willa," she corrected softly. "If I'm staying, please call me Willa." Before Rhett could respond, the sound of approaching hoofbeats reached them. He moved instantly to the barn door, rifle ready, motioning for Willa to stay back. A lone rider approached up the long drive, an older man on a dappled gray. Rhett relaxed slightly as he recognized Sheriff Tom Buckley. The sheriff raised a hand in greeting as he drew closer. "Morning, Morgan," he called, reining in his horse. His shrewd eyes took in the rifle in Rhett's hands. "Trouble." "Just cautious," Rhett replied. "What brings you out this way, Sheriff?" Buckley dismounted with the stiffness of age, his weathered face grave beneath his gray mustache. "News from town. Thought you should hear it direct." His gaze shifted to Willa, who had emerged from the barn shadows. "Ma'am?" "Sheriff?" She acknowledged, her posture tensing. "This about the snakes?" Rhett asked bluntly. Surprise flashed across Buckley's face. "You heard already." "Heard what?" "They're in Silverhorn. 6, maybe 7 of them asking after a woman and baby." He studied Willa more carefully. "I'm guessing that it'd be you, ma'am." Willa paled, but didn't deny it. Buckley sighed heavily. "Thought as much when I saw tracks leading this way." He turned back to Rhett. "You're harboring Emery Tate's wife, Morgan. That puts you and the little one in the crosshairs." "She's under my protection," Rhett said simply. The sheriff shook his head. "I've known you 8 years, son. You're a good man who's seen enough trouble. I'm asking you to reconsider. Let me take the lady and her child. There's a northbound stage tomorrow. I can see them safely out of the territory." "And then what?" Rhett demanded. "She keeps running until Tate catches her, or until she and the boy freeze or starve." "Better than what'll happen if they stay," Buckley countered. "Tate's offering $500 for information on her whereabouts. In a town where most folks make less than $1 a day, that's mighty tempting." "Has anyone talked?" Willa asked, her voice steady despite her fear. "Not yet," Buckley assured her. "But it's only a matter of time. Those men, they've been drinking, flashing money around, making threats." He looked back at Rhett. "They killed Miller's dog just to prove a point. Shot it right in the street." "I know what kind of men they are," Rhett said quietly. "Then you know what I'm saying makes sense." Before Rhett could respond, Ellie's voice called from the house. "Papa, Papa, come quick!" Something in her tone had Rhett moving instantly, Willa and the sheriff close behind. They found Ellie standing on the porch, pointing towards something affixed to the front door. An arrow, its shaft buried deep in the wood. Attached to it was a piece of paper, and beneath that something dark and wet glistened in the morning light. Buckley reached it first, cursing under his breath as he read the message. "What does it say?" Willa asked, though her ashen face suggested she already knew. The sheriff turned his expression grim. "Return the woman, or we burn it all. And that," he added, pointing to the dark substance, "is blood. Fresh blood." Rhett stared at the arrow, the primitive threat, and felt something cold and familiar settle in his chest. The calm clarity that had always preceded violence in his former life. The Carolina ghost stirring from his long slumber. "Get inside," he told Willa and Ellie. "Sheriff, you'd best ride back to town." "What happens next? You don't want to witness officially." Buckley studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You sure about this course, Morgan?" "I am." "Then God help you." The sheriff mounted his horse. "I'll delay any official response as long as I can, but if shooting starts—" He left the sentence unfinished. As Buckley rode away, Rhett turned to find Willa watching him, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and something else. Hope, perhaps, or the desperate belief that she might have found a protector stronger than her tormentor. "He's right, you know," she said softly. "You should let us go." Rhett pulled the arrow from the door with a single sharp motion. "Nobody's going anywhere," he replied, his voice low and final. "The snakes want a fight. They've found one." By midday, the Morgan homestead had transformed. No longer just a ranch house and barn, it was becoming a fortress. Rhett moved with the systematic efficiency of a man who'd fortified positions before his face set in grim concentration as he worked. The windows on the ground floor were reinforced with planks, leaving only narrow gaps for rifles. Furniture was repositioned to provide cover. Water barrels were filled and placed throughout the house in case of fire. In the yard, Rhett had dug shallow trenches in the snow, creating shooting positions with clear lines of sight to all approaches. Willa watched him from the porch, Jonah bundled against her chest. "You've done this before," she observed. "Petersburg," Rhett replied, without looking up from securing a plank. 64 into 65. Longest siege of the war. Willa nodded, familiar with the history. "You were there the whole time." "Most of it." He drove another nail with unnecessary force. "Until Grant finally broke through." She heard what he didn't say, that the Confederate defeat at Petersburg had led directly to Lee's surrender at Appomattox. For a Southern soldier, it represented the death of hope. "I'm sorry," she said softly. Rhett straightened, wiping sweat despite the cold. "War's long over, Mrs. Hart." "Is it?" She gestured to his preparations. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Different war now." He glanced toward the house where Ellie could be seen at an upstairs window. "Different things worth fighting for." Inside, Rhett pulled up the floorboards beneath his bed, revealing a hidden compartment. From it, he withdrew items he'd hoped never to use again. A Spencer repeating rifle, a Sharps sniper rifle with scope ammunition, and several sticks of dynamite. "Sweet Jesus," Willa breathed, seeing the arsenal as she entered with coffee. "War supplies," Rhett explained, checking the action on the Spencer. "Buried most of it when we settled here. Catherine thought it best." "And your wife sounds like a wise woman." "She was." His voice softened slightly. "Schoolteacher from Richmond. Too good for the likes of me, but she never seemed to notice." Willa set the coffee beside him. "How did she—" "Fever 2 years ago." Rhett's hands never stopped working as he spoke, loading ammunition with practiced efficiency. "Doctor couldn't get here in time. Mountain passes were closed by snow, just like now." He looked up, his eyes meeting hers. "That's why I couldn't turn you away in the storm. Couldn't bear another death I might have prevented." The confession hung between them, raw and honest. Before Willa could respond, Ellie's voice called from outside. "Papa Ryder's coming." They moved swiftly to the windows. 3 men approached on horseback, still distant, but moving purposefully toward the homestead. "Get Ellie upstairs," Rhett ordered, reaching for the Spencer. "In the back bedroom, away from the windows. Stay with her." Willa hesitated. "Let me help. I can shoot." "Not yet. If they're just scouts, I don't want to show our full hand." He checked the rifle once more. "Go, please." Upstairs, Willa found Ellie already in the designated room, her small face solemn as she sat on the bed, clutching a rag doll. "Are the bad men coming?" she asked, as Willa closed the door. "Just some visitors," Willa answered, settling beside her with Jonah. "Your father will talk to them." "Will there be shooting?" Willa hesitated, unwilling to lie. "I hope not, sweetheart." "Papa was a soldier," Ellie said matter-of-factly. "He killed people in the war. He told me so." "Wars are different," Willa explained gently. "Men do what they must to protect their homes, their families." Ellie nodded, seemingly satisfied with this explanation. "That's what Papa's doing now. Protecting us." "Yes," Willa agreed, pulling the child closer. "That's exactly what he's doing." Downstairs, Rhett stood on the porch rifle, held casually but ready. The three riders stopped at a respectful distance just beyond easy shooting range. The leader, a wiry man with a pockmarked face, raised his hand in greeting. "Afternoon," he called. "Looking for a word with the man of the house." "You found him," Rhett replied evenly. "State your business." "Name's Hawkins. These are my associates, Pike and Mendoza." He gestured to the men flanking him, a heavy-set brute and a slender Mexican with a knife scar across his cheek. "We represent a gentleman looking for his wife and child. Been told they might be in these parts." "No wives here but mine," Rhett lied smoothly. "And she's been dead 2 years." Hawkins smiled, revealing tobacco-stained teeth. "That's so. Because Sheriff Buckley was seen riding this way earlier. Man like that doesn't make social calls in weather like this. Sheriff and I have business, nothing to do with any missing wife. Mind if we look around just to be thorough?" "Mind considerably," Rhett said, shifting the rifle slightly. "Private property." The Mexican Mendoza spat into the snow. "He's lying, Hawkins. The tracks we followed led right here." "Wolves," Rhett said. "Had to shoot 4 of them last night. Follow those tracks back, you'll find the carcasses." Hawkins studied the homestead, taking note of the reinforced windows, the defensive positions. His eyes narrowed. "Oyster Tate is offering $500 for information," he said finally. "Double that for the safe return of his family. Man misses his wife, and boy, something fierce." "Good luck to him," Rhett replied coldly. Hawkins's friendly demeanor evaporated. "You're making a mistake, mister. Emery Tate isn't a man who takes kindly to interference in his personal affairs." "Neither am I." A tense silence stretched between them. Rhett could feel their assessment, 3 against 1, but the one had cover high ground, and the look of a man who knew how to use the rifle in his hands. "We'll be going then," Hawkins decided finally, "but we'll be back, with more friends." "I'll be here." As the riders turned to leave, Pike suddenly drew his pistol, firing a wild shot toward the house. Rhett's reaction was instantaneous. The Spencer came up, barked twice, and Pike tumbled from his saddle dead before he hit the ground. Hawkins and Mendoza spurred their horses, galloping away as Rhett fired again, deliberately missing. A warning not to return. When they were gone, he approached Pike's body cautiously, rifle ready. The man was undoubtedly dead, a bullet through his chest, and another through his throat. Rhett searched him quickly, finding nothing of interest except a snake emblem tattooed on his forearm, the mark of Tate's gang. He dragged the body to the edge of the property and left it for the wolves, a message of his own. Inside, he found Willa descending the stairs, her face pale. "You killed him," she said. It wasn't a question. "He fired first." "I know, we heard." She glanced behind her where Ellie stood at the top of the stairs, eyes wide. She saw from the window. Rhett set his rifle down and moved toward his daughter. "Ellie." "You shot the bad man," she said, her voice small but steady. "I did. He knelt before her. He was trying to hurt us. Like the wolves. Yes, like the wolves. Ellie nodded slowly, processing this. Are more coming? Probably. Rhett saw no point in lying to her. But we'll be ready. Is it because of Mrs. Willa and Jonah? Her perception cut to the heart of the matter. Yes. Then we have to protect them, Ellie declared with childish certainty, because they're our family now. Rhett glanced at Willa, who looked as startled as he felt by the child's pronouncement. Ellie misses. Hart and Jonah are our guests, not... But she smells like Mama, Ellie insisted. And Jonah needs a papa. His real papa is a bad man, isn't he? The simple logic of children, Rhett thought wearily. It's complicated, sweetheart. No, it's not, Ellie replied with perfect confidence. We keep them safe, that's all. Later, as dusk settled over the land, Rhett stood watch at the front window while Willa prepared a simple supper. The domestic scene felt surreal after the violence of the afternoon. Your daughter is remarkably resilient, Willa observed, slicing bread. Too much so sometimes, Rhett replied. She's seen more hardship than a child should. Children adapt. They find ways to make sense of the world, even when it's senseless. Rhett glanced at her. Speaking from experience, Willa nodded. My father died violently, shot over a gambling debt when I was barely 16. I found ways to make it fit into my understanding of the world. And when Tate showed his true nature, her hands stilled. That was different. I couldn't make sense of it. Couldn't understand how the charming man who courted me could become... She trailed off, then squared her shoulders. But Jonah gave me clarity. I knew I had to leave no matter the cost. Tate will come himself, Rhett said, changing the subject. Now that he knows you're here. Yes, Willa resumed her work, her movements precise. He'll bring at least a dozen men. They'll surround the property, cut off escape routes. Then he'll offer terms, me and Jonah, in exchange for your lives. And if I refuse, they'll attack at night, probably try to burn you out first. Her voice was clinically detached, as if discussing strangers rather than their own fate. Emery enjoys making examples of those who defy him. Rhett studied her profile in the fading light. You know him well. I shared his bed for over a year, Mr. Morgan. I know exactly what kind of monster wears Emery Tate's skin. The starkness of her statement silenced him. Outside, the last light faded from the sky, and the first stars appeared over the mountains. We need more men, Rhett said finally. I can hold them off for a while, but not indefinitely. There's no one, Willa replied. The people in Silverhorn are too afraid, and rightfully so. There might be one. Rhett moved away from the window. Joshua Freeman lives about 3 miles west near the creek. Fought with me in Virginia. Another Confederate? No, Freeman was a slave. Became a free man after emancipation, fought for the Union. We met after the war when we both came west. Rhett checked his pocket watch. If I leave now, I can reach him and be back before midnight. You'd trust a former enemy? Willa asked, surprised. War's over, Mrs. Hart. Besides, Joshua saved my life once. Indian attack 3 years ago. Man's a crack shot and good in a fight. Rhett began gathering supplies. Can you handle things here for a few hours? Yes, she hesitated. Be careful. As Rhett prepared to leave, a new sound reached them, hoofbeats approaching rapidly. He motioned Willa back from the window, taking up his rifle once more. Get Ellie and get upstairs, he ordered. But before Willa could move, a voice called out from the darkness. Morgan, it's Buckley. Let me in quick. Rhett recognized the sheriff's voice and moved swiftly to the door. opening it just enough to let the older man slip inside. Buckley was breathing hard, his face grim in the lamplight. "They're coming!" he gasped. "Tate himself arrived in Silverhorn an hour ago, with at least 15 men. They've taken over the town." "Casualties?" Rhett asked sharply. "Not yet, thank God, but they're liquoring up, getting ready to ride out here at first light." Buckley looked at Willa. "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but half the town heard Tate swear he'd burn this place to the ground with everyone in it if you weren't turned over." Willa's face paled, but she remained composed. "And the other half? What did they do?" "Nothing," Buckley admitted, shame evident in his voice. "Including me. I'm just one old man with a tin star." "That why you rode out here?" Rhett asked. "To warn us." Buckley straightened. "Figured I owed you that much at least. And—" He reached into his coat, producing a folded document. "This came by telegraph this afternoon. Arrest warrant for you, Morgan." "What?" Willa exclaimed. Rhett took the paper, reading it quickly. "Murder charge. For Pike. Tate has the new Circuit Judge Reynolds in his pocket," Buckley explained. "Claimed Pike was just delivering a message when you gunned him down unprovoked." "That's a lie," Willa protested. "He fired first. I heard it." "Won't matter," Rhett said grimly. "Tate's preparing to come at us legally as well as with guns." "What do we do?" Willa asked. Rhett was silent for a long moment, weighing their dwindling options. Finally, he turned to Buckley. "Sheriff, I need you to take a message to Joshua Freeman. Tell him I need him and Samuel here as soon as possible. Armed." Buckley nodded. "I can do that. What else?" "How many men in town might stand with us, honest count?" The sheriff considered. "Maybe 5. The rest are either too scared or secretly hoping for a piece of Tate's bounty." "5's better than nothing. Get word to them if you can, but quietly." Rhett folded the warrant and tucked it away. "And one more thing. See if Doc Abernathy can prepare supplies. Bandages, laudanum, the works. I've got a feeling we'll need them." After Buckley departed, Rhett turned to find Willa watching him, her expression unreadable in the dim light. "You should leave," she said softly. "Take Ellie and go now while you still can. Head into the high country until this passes. And leave you and Jonah to Tate." Rhett shook his head. "Not happening. He'll kill you. He'll kill Ellie." Willa's voice broke. "I can't have that on my conscience." Rhett moved closer, his voice low and intense. "Listen to me. Running isn't an option. Tate would just hunt us down, use you to draw us out. Our only chance is to stand and fight here on ground I know. Against 15 men, it's suicide." "Maybe." Rhett's mouth set in a grim line. "But I've faced worse odds." "Why, hey?" Willa demanded, her control finally slipping. "Why risk everything for us? You barely know me." "Because it's right," Rhett replied simply. "And because I've spent too many years hiding from what I am." "And what is that?" A cold smile touched his lips. "The Carolina Ghost. Time to remind Emery Tate why that name used to make Union officers wake screaming in the night." The rest of the night passed in tense preparation. Rhett continued fortifying the house, positioning weapons and ammunition at strategic points. Willa helped where she could, her nimble fingers filling cartridges, while Ellie slept fitfully upstairs. Near midnight, Joshua Freeman arrived with his 17-year-old son, Samuel. Joshua was a powerfully built man in his 50s, his dark face weathered by years of frontier life, his left arm ending in a stump just below the elbow, a war wound. Samuel was tall and lean, with his father's strong features and watchful eyes. "Didn't expect to see you riding into another war, Morgan," Joshua said by way of greeting, clasping Rhett's hand firmly. Didn't expect to be fighting one, Rhett replied. Appreciate you coming. Joshua nodded toward Willa, who stood uncertainly in the doorway with Jonah. This the cause worth dying for. Joshua, Rhett said formally, meet Mrs. Willa Hart and her son Jonah. They're under my protection. Joshua studied Willa for a long moment, then nodded once. Ma'am? Mr. Freeman, Willa acknowledged. Thank you for coming. I know the risk you're taking. Risk's part of living free, Joshua replied simply. He turned back to Rhett. Buckley says 15 men, maybe more. That true, at least, led by Emery Tate himself. Samuel, who had been silent until now, let out a low whistle. The Emery Tate, the outlaw. The same, Rhett confirmed. Damn! The young man breathed, then quickly added, Pardon my language, ma'am. Willa managed a small smile. I've heard worse, Mr. Freeman. We'll need to conserve ammunition, Joshua said, all business now. Make every shot count. Samuel and I brought what we had, 2 rifles, a shotgun, and about 60 rounds. It'll help, Rhett acknowledged. I've got another idea, too. He led them to the kitchen table where he unrolled a rough map of the property. There's a hidden cellar beneath the barn, originally built as a cold storage, but I've expanded it. Connects to a tunnel that leads to the creek bed about 300 yards east. Joshua raised an eyebrow. Escape route. Last resort, Rhett corrected. If things go badly, Willa and the children can use it to reach the hills. There's a hunting cabin up there, well hidden, stocked with enough supplies for a few weeks. And us? Samuel asked. Rhett's expression hardened. We make sure they get away clean. The implications were clear to everyone in the room. If it came to using the tunnel, the men would be staying behind to buy time, likely at the cost of their lives. There's more, Rhett continued, pointing to locations on the map. I've prepared firing positions here, here, and here, and I have 6 sticks of dynamite we can position as traps. Where'd you get dynamite? Joshua asked, surprised. War cash, Rhett replied. Been saving it for a rainy day. As they continued planning, Willa slipped away to check on the children. She found Ellie and Jonah both sleeping soundly, oblivious to the grim preparations below. Looking at them, so innocent and vulnerable, Willa felt a surge of determination. She had been running for months, living in fear. Perhaps it was time to stand and fight. When she returned downstairs, the men were still huddled over the map. She approached quietly, listening, as Rhett outlined possible attack scenarios. I can help, she said during a pause. I know how Emery thinks, how he plans. And I can shoot. The men exchanged glances, but it was Joshua who spoke. With respect, Mrs. Hart combats no place for a woman. With respect, Mr. Freeman, Willa replied evenly. I stopped being just a woman the moment I put a knife in my husband's lieutenant and fled with my son. I've been fighting for our lives ever since. A surprised silence followed her declaration. Rhett studied her with new eyes. You killed one of Tate's men, he asked. Curtis Blake, Willa confirmed. Emery's right hand. He came to our room drunk one night when Emery was away, tried to force himself on me. Her voice remained steady. I stabbed him in the throat with a kitchen knife, took Jonah, and ran that same night. Joshua let out a low whistle. No wonder Tate wants you back so badly. You humiliated him. It's more than that, Willa said, glancing toward the stairs where the children slept. Emery isn't capable of love, not even for his own son. What he can't stand, and is losing something he considers his property. Then he'll come hard, Rhett concluded. No negotiation, no mercy. None, Willa agreed. So I ask again, let me help. For my son's sake, if nothing else. Rhett nodded slowly. All right, but you stay in the house with the children. Last line of defense. Before Willa could respond, a distant sound caught their attention, the rhythmic pounding of multiple horses approaching at a gallop. That's not possible, Joshua muttered. Buckley said they'd come at dawn. Rhett moved swiftly to the window, peering through a gap in the shutters. In the pale moonlight, he could make out dark shapes moving toward the homestead, from all directions, at least a dozen riders surrounding the property. They're here, he said grimly. Tate must have changed his mind about waiting. Or someone in town warned him we were preparing, Joshua added. Rhett turned to Willa, his expression deadly serious. Get the children, now! As Willa hurried upstairs, Rhett and the Freemans took up their positions, rifles ready. Outside, the riders had stopped just beyond easy rifle range, forming a loose circle around the homestead. A voice called out from the darkness, confident and coldly amused. Morgan, I know you're in there. I know what you're protecting. The voice hardened. Send out my wife and son, and I might let you live. You have 1 minute to decide. Emery Tate had arrived, and the siege of the Morgan homestead had begun. 1 minute, Morgan. Emery Tate's voice cut through the night. Then we burn you out. Inside the darkened house, Rhett exchanged glances with Joshua. Get to the barn, he whispered. Trigger position. Joshua nodded and slipped out the back door, moving low and fast through the shadows toward the barn. Samuel took up position at the side window, rifle ready. Upstairs, Willa gathered a still drowsy Ellie and Jonah. We need to be very quiet, she whispered, wrapping Jonah tightly to muffle any cries. Like a game. Can you do that, Ellie? The little girl nodded solemnly, eyes wide in the darkness. Are the bad men here? Yes, but your father will protect us. Willa led her to the back bedroom where Rhett had prepared an emergency pack, food, water, blankets, and a small pistol. We just need to be ready. Downstairs, Rhett stood in the shadows beside the front window, watching the riders through his rifle scope. In the center, slightly ahead of the others, sat a man on a black stallion. Even in the dim moonlight, Emery Tate cut an imposing figure, tall, broad-shouldered, with a distinctive white streak in his dark hair. He wore a long duster and a wide-brimmed hat, and the silver handle of a custom revolver glinted at his hip. Your minute's up, Morgan, Tate called. What's it going to be? Rhett took a deep breath, then called back. Ride away, Tate. The woman and child, stay here. A murmur ran through the gathered men. Tate himself went very still. You're making a mistake, he replied, his voice dangerously soft. I'm a reasonable man. I just want what's mine. People aren't property, Rhett countered. Not even in Colorado territory. Tate laughed, the sound hollow in the night air. High principles from a man with a murder warrant on his head. He gestured to his men. I've got 15 guns against what you and maybe 1 or 2 others. Those are poor odds for a principled stand. I've faced worse. Have you? Tate leaned forward in his saddle. Let me tell you how this ends, Morgan. My men will kill you and anyone with you. We'll burn this place to the ground. And Willa... He paused. Willa will watch it all happen before I take her back. Rhett's finger tightened on the trigger. Tate's face centered in his scope. One shot could end it all. But at this range, in this light, even the Carolina Ghost couldn't guarantee a kill. And if he missed, the assault would begin immediately. Last chance, Morgan, Tate called. Send them out, or we attack. Rhett's reply was to fire a single shot that kicked up dirt just inches from the front hooves of Tate's stallion. The horse reared, nearly unseating its rider. Next one won't miss, Rhett promised. Tate regained control of his mount, his face darkening with rage. Burn it down, he roared. Kill the men, but bring the woman and child out alive. The riders surged forward, firing as they came. Bullets thudded into the reinforced walls and shutters as Rhett returned fire, dropping one man from his saddle, before ducking back from the window. From the barn, Joshua opened fire, the unexpected flank attack causing momentary confusion among Tate's men. Several broke off to address this new threat, dividing their forces exactly as Rhett had planned. "Samuel," Rhett called, "east side." The young man moved to the indicated position, firing at riders attempting to circle behind the house. His shots were measured, disciplined. Joshua had taught his son well. Outside, Tate was shouting orders, reorganizing his men. 3 dismounted and began creeping toward the barn, while others maintained covering fire. Rhett caught a glimpse of movement, a man with a torch approaching the front porch. He took aim and fired. The man fell, but the torch rolled from his hand and onto the dry wood of the porch steps. Flames sprang up immediately. "Fire!" Samuel shouted, abandoning his position to grab a water bucket. "Stay back!" Rhett ordered. "It's what they want." Too late. As Samuel reached the door, a shot rang out. The young man staggered, clutching his shoulder, then collapsed. Rhett lunged forward, dragging Samuel to safety as bullets splintered the doorframe above them. The boy was conscious, his face contorted with pain, but the wound wasn't immediately life-threatening. "Pressure here," Rhett instructed, guiding Samuel's hand to the bloody hole in his shoulder. "Don't move." The fire was spreading, crawling up the front steps toward the door. Rhett grabbed a blanket, preparing to smother the flames, when a thunderous explosion rocked the night. Joshua had triggered the first of the dynamite charges planted earlier along the most likely approach to the barn. The blast sent 2 of Tate's men flying and scattered the horses of several others. Taking advantage of the confusion, Rhett darted onto the porch and beat out the flames. Bullets whined past him, but the shooters were disoriented by the explosion, their aim poor. Back inside, he found Willa had come downstairs, Jonah secured in a sling across her chest. "Samuel's hit," Rhett said tersely. "Not too bad, but he needs tending." Willa immediately knelt beside the young man, examining the wound with practiced hands. "The bullet passed through," she reported. "Clean entry and exit. He's lucky." "Don't feel lucky," Samuel groaned. "You will when you're not missing an arm like your father," Willa replied, tearing strips from her petticoat to bind the wound. "Hold still." Outside, the shooting had momentarily subsided. Tate's men were regrouping, undoubtedly planning their next move. The brief lull wouldn't last long. "Where's Ellie?" Rhett asked, reloading his rifle. "Upstairs, hidden in the storage closet, as you said." Willa finished bandaging Samuel. "Rhett, there are too many of them. Joshua can't hold the barn much longer." As if to punctuate her words, another explosion sounded the second dynamite charge. But this time, it was followed almost immediately by sustained gunfire from the direction of the barn. "They've reached Joshua," Rhett realized. He moved to the window, trying to see through the smoke and darkness. The barn door stood open, muzzle flashes visible from within. "We need to help him," Samuel insisted, struggling to rise. "You stay put," Rhett ordered. To Willa he said, "Get ready to move to the cellar. If I'm not back in 5 minutes, take the tunnel. Head for the cabin." "What are you going to do?" Rhett checked his revolver, then thrust it into his belt. "Create a diversion." Before she could protest, he slipped out the back door and disappeared into the smoke-filled night. Willa turned to Samuel. "Can you stand?" "Think so." He grunted, using the wall to brace himself as he rose shakily to his feet. "Good. I need your help getting Ellie." Together, they made their way upstairs, moving carefully in the darkness. Outside, Rhett circled behind the house, using the smoke from the explosions for cover. He could see 4 of Tate's men converging on the barn, where Joshua was putting up a fierce defense. but the older man was pinned down, unable to escape. Rhett needed a distraction, something to draw attention away from both the barn and the house, long enough for everyone to reach the tunnel. His eyes fell on the corral, where his 3 horses were penned, agitated by the gunfire and explosions. Moving silently, he reached the corral gate. With a quick prayer, he fired his revolver into the air and flung the gate open. The horses bolted thundering past him toward the open pasture, directly through the positions of several of Tate's men. The resulting chaos was immediate. Shouts of alarm, rearing horses, and confused gunfire erupted as the panicked animals charged through the darkness. In the confusion, Rhett sprinted to the barn, ducking inside to find Joshua crouched behind a hay bale, bleeding from a graze across his temple. "Time to go?" Rhett said, helping the older man to his feet. "'Bout time," Joshua grunted. "Was starting to think you'd forgotten me." Together they stumbled toward the back of the barn, where the cellar entrance was hidden beneath loose floorboards. Behind them, the shouts from outside grew closer. "They're regrouping," Rhett warned. "We've got maybe 2 minutes." They had just reached the hidden door when the barn's main entrance burst open. 3 of Tate's men charged in, guns drawn. "There!" one shouted, raising his revolver. Joshua spun with surprising speed, firing his last 2 shots. One attacker went down, but the others returned fire. Rhett felt something slam into his side, a bullet grazing his ribs. He fired back, dropping a second man. The third took cover behind a support beam, keeping them pinned with sporadic shots. "Go!" Joshua urged, pressing his rifle into Rhett's hands. "I'll hold him." "Not without you," Rhett insisted. "Don't be a fool. Your daughter needs you. Go." Before Rhett could argue further, more men appeared at the barn entrance. Making a split-second decision, he slipped through the cellar door, pulling it closed behind him. The last thing he saw was Joshua taking aim at the newcomers, his weathered face set with grim determination. Gunfire erupted above as Rhett descended the ladder into the earth-walled cellar. He paused at the bottom, listening as the shooting intensified, then abruptly ceased. A heavy silence followed, broken only by the sound of boots on floorboards and men's voices. "Check everywhere," a commanding voice ordered Tate himself. "They have to be hiding somewhere." Rhett forced himself to move, hurrying through the low-ceilinged tunnel that led away from the barn. After about 50 yards, it opened into a wider chamber where Willa waited with both children. Samuel sat propped against the wall, pale but conscious. "Joshua," Willa asked, seeing Rhett was alone. Rhett shook his head, once his expression grim. "He stayed behind. Bought us time." Samuel made a strangled sound somewhere between a gasp and a sob. "Pa, I'm sorry, son," Rhett said, placing a hand on the young man's good shoulder. "He died protecting us. Protecting you." Above them, muffled by earth and distance, came the sounds of the search-booted feet, shouted commands, things being overturned. Then, more ominously, the crackling of flames. "They're burning the barn," Rhett realized. "We need to move. Now." With Willa carrying Jonah and Rhett supporting both Ellie and the injured Samuel, they made their way through the narrow escape tunnel. It ran for nearly a quarter-mile, following the natural contour of a dry creek bed, before emerging in a small ravine, sheltered by pine trees. The night air was frigid. As they emerged, the stars brilliant overhead. Behind them, an orange glow lit the sky. The barn fully engulfed in flames now. "The house?" Willa asked, her voice barely audible. "Probably burning too," Rhett admitted. He took a moment to assess their situation. Samuel was weakening, the blood loss and exertion taking their toll. Ellie was exhausted, but uncomplaining, her small face resolute in the starlight. Jonah miraculously remained quiet in his sling. "The cabin's about 3 miles from here," Rhett said. Up into the high country. Rough going, especially at night. Can Samuel make it? Willa asked quietly. Have to, the young man said through gritted teeth. Not staying behind. Rhett nodded, respecting his determination. Let's move then. We stick to cover, avoid open ground. Tate will have men searching once they realize we're not in the house. They set off a ragged procession moving slowly through the darkness. The terrain grew steeper, the air thinner and colder as they climbed. Twice they had to stop and hide as riders passed in the distance searching. But the night and the rugged landscape provided cover, and by dawn they had reached the small hunting cabin nestled in a stand of pines high above the valley. The cabin was primitive, but solid, a single room with a stone fireplace, rough-hewn bunks along one wall, and basic supplies stored in a root cellar beneath the floorboards. Rhett had maintained it for years as a hunting lodge, and more privately as a bolt hole should his past ever catch up with him. It's not much, he apologized as they entered. It's perfect, Willa said, settling Jonah on one of the bunks. The baby had finally begun to fuss, hungry after the long night. Rhett built a small fire while Willa tended to Samuel's wound, replacing the makeshift bandage with clean cloth from the cabin's supplies. The young man was running a fever, but the wound showed no immediate signs of infection. Ellie, exhausted beyond words, curled up on a bunk and fell instantly asleep. Rhett covered her with a blanket, then moved to the cabin's single window staring down at the valley below. In the gray light of dawn, he could just make out his homestead, or what remained of it. The barn was completely gone, the house a smoldering ruin. Everything he and Catherine had built, everything he'd worked for since the war, reduced to ashes in a single night. I'm sorry, Willa said quietly, coming to stand beside him. This is my fault. No, Rhett replied firmly. Tate's fault. No one else's. I brought this to your door. You brought honesty and courage. Tate brought destruction. He turned to face her. I don't regret my choice, Willa. In the soft light of dawn, with exhaustion etched into every line of her face, she was still beautiful. Stronger than she knew Rhett thought. A survivor like him. Joshua died because of that choice, she said, her voice breaking slightly. Joshua died a free man defending what he believed in, Rhett corrected gently. He made his own choice. As did I. Before Willa could respond, a sound from outside froze them both, the crunch of boots on pine needles. Someone was approaching the cabin. Rhett moved instantly, retrieving his rifle from where he'd propped it by the door. He motioned Willa back away from the window. Get down, he whispered. Wake Samuel if you can. Quietly. The footsteps grew closer, then stopped just outside the cabin door. Rhett positioned himself to the side rifle raised, ready to fire the instant the door opened. A knock came 3 short raps, then 2 longer ones. A pattern Rhett recognized. Cautiously, he moved to the door. Identify yourself, he called. A friend, came the reply, Sheriff Buckley's voice. I'm alone, Morgan. Rhett cracked the door, his rifle still ready, and found the older man standing there haggard and soot-stained. You look like hell, Sheriff, Rhett observed, lowering his weapon slightly. Feel worse, Buckley replied. May I come in? Rhett stood aside, allowing the sheriff to enter. Buckley nodded to Willa, then sank wearily onto a chair. How'd you find us? Rhett asked, still suspicious. Joshua told me about this place months ago, Buckley explained. Said if trouble ever came, this is where you'd head. His eyes darkened. They killed him, Morgan. Shot him down, then hung his body from the barn beam before they torched it. Samuel made a choked sound from his bunk. Willa moved to his side, placing a comforting hand on his arm. "What about the town?" Rhett asked. "Tate's tearing it apart looking for you, offering $1,000 now for information." Buckley removed his hat, running a hand through his thinning gray hair. "He's got most of the men looking, even some I thought were decent folk. Fear and greed make for powerful motivation." "What about you?" Willa asked quietly. "What brings you here, Sheriff? Surely not the reward." Buckley met her gaze directly. "Ma'am, I've worn this star for 18 years. Seen all manner of evil men come through Silverhorn. But Tate," he shook his head, "Tate's different. There's something wrong in him, something that enjoys the suffering of others." "That doesn't answer my question," Willa pressed. "I'm here because it's right," Buckley said simply, "and because I'm tired of being afraid." Rhett studied the older man, weighing his words against the risk of trusting him. Finally, he nodded. "What's Tate's next move?" "He's convinced you're still in the area. Has men watching all the roads the past two." Buckley leaned forward. "But there's something else you should know. Tate's not working alone." "What do you mean?" Rhett asked. "Judge Reynolds arrived in town this morning. Brought papers, legal papers. Claim against your land, Morgan." "My land? On what grounds?" "Abandonment, technically. But the real reason is underneath it." Buckley met his eyes directly. "Silver. A survey team found signs of a major deposit running right through your property. Reynolds and Tate are working together to seize it legally." "So it's not just about Willa and Jonah," Rhett said slowly. "It's about the land." "For Reynolds, yes. For Tate." Buckley glanced at Willa. "I think it's personal. But the judge gave him the means to do it legally." "There's nothing legal about burning a man's home," Samuel interjected bitterly. "No," Buckley agreed. "But with no witnesses except Tate's own men, who's to say what really happened? The official story is that you fired first, that it was self-defense on their part." The implications were clear. Even if they survived, returning to Silverhorn meant facing not just Tate's gang, but the law itself corrupted by greed and power. "We need to get out of the territory," Willa said. "Head east, maybe, or California." "Tate's watching the roads," Buckley reminded her. "And with Samuel injured, you won't get far on foot." A heavy silence fell over the cabin. Rhett moved to the fireplace, stoking the small flame as he considered their dwindling options. "There might be another way," he said finally. "But it's a long shot." "At this point, I'll take any shot," Willa replied. "My father-in-law, Judge Elias Morgan, lives in Denver. He has connections, influence." Rhett's expression was conflicted. "We haven't spoken since Catherine's funeral. He blamed me for her death." "With good reason?" Buckley asked bluntly. Rhett's jaw tightened. "I was in Silverhorn when the fever took her. Couldn't get back through the storm in time." The old pain was evident in his voice. "Elias said I should have been there. Said a lot of things." "But he might help," Willa pressed. "For Ellie's sake, maybe. He doted on her." Rhett sighed. "It's a 3-day ride to Denver in good conditions. Longer with Samuel injured and 2 young children." "I can make it," Samuel insisted, though his flushed face told a different story. "The fever's getting worse," Willa said quietly to Rhett. "He needs a doctor soon." Buckley stood suddenly. "I'll go to Denver. I can ride fast, traveling alone. Bring back help." "Tate's men will be watching for you," Rhett warned. "Let me worry about that." The sheriff's weathered face held new determination. "Give me a letter for Judge Morgan. I'll see it delivered." Rhett hesitated, then nodded. Finding paper and a stub of pencil in the cabin's supplies, He wrote quickly a brief explanation of their situation and a plea for assistance not for himself, but for Ellie and the others. He folded the paper and handed it to Buckley. "Elias Morgan, Denver Federal Court," he said. "He's not an easy man, Sheriff. Be direct with him." "I can handle difficult men," Buckley replied, tucking the letter inside his coat. "I'll leave at nightfall. Less chance of being spotted." "What about us?" Willa asked. "How long can we stay here safely?" "The cabin's well hidden," Rhett assured her. "And I stocked it with enough supplies for at least 2 weeks. We stay put, keep the fire small, avoid being seen." "And if Tate finds us before help arrives?" Samuel asked, his voice weak but determined. Rhett checked his rifle, then the revolver at his hip. "Then we make our stand here." As dusk approached, Buckley prepared to leave. The aging sheriff had rested through the day, gathering strength for the hard ride ahead. 3 days to Denver," Rhett reminded him as they stood outside the cabin. "Then however long it takes to convince Elias. We can hold out a week, maybe 10 days, if we're careful with supplies." Buckley nodded, mounting his horse with the stiffness of age. "I'll move as fast as I can. If I'm not back in a week, we'll manage," Rhett assured him, though they both knew what that likely meant. With a final nod, Buckley turned his horse and disappeared into the gathering darkness, heading east toward the distant pass that would eventually lead to Denver. Inside the cabin, Willa had prepared a meager supper from their supplies: beans, jerky, and hard biscuits. Ellie ate hungrily, her resilience remarkable after all they'd endured. Samuel managed only a few bites before falling into a restless sleep, his fever still climbing despite Willa's ministrations. "Will he make it?" Rhett asked quietly as they sat by the fire, the children asleep. "I don't know," Willa admitted. "The wound itself isn't terrible, but infection's setting in. Without proper medicine." She left the sentence unfinished. Rhett stared into the flames, the weight of responsibility heavy on his shoulders. 3 lives, 4, counting his own, hanging in the balance dependent on his decisions. "Tell me about your wife," Willis said, suddenly breaking the silence. "Catherine. What was she like?" The question caught him off guard. For so long, Catherine had been a closed subject, a wound too painful to probe. "She was light," he said finally. "That's the word that always comes to mind. Light in her step, her laugh. She saw good in everything, even me." A faint smile touched his lips. "Schoolteacher from Richmond. We met after the war when I was drifting. She was visiting relatives in Charleston. Said she took one look at me and knew I needed saving." "Did you?" "God, yes. Those first years after Appomattox were dark. I'd done things during the war." He broke off, shaking his head. "Let's just say the Carolina ghost earned his reputation. Catherine never asked about that time. She just accepted what I was and believed I could be more." "She sounds remarkable." "She was." Rhett's voice softened. "When she died, something in me died too. I've been half living since then, going through the motions for Ellie's sake." "Until now," Willa observed quietly. Rhett looked up, meeting her gaze across the firelight. "Until now," he agreed. A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the crackling of the fire and the soft breathing of the sleeping children. "What will you do?" Willa asked eventually. "If we survive this, rebuild, I suppose. It's good land, despite what Tate and Reynolds want it for." Rhett's expression hardened. "Or maybe I'll sell it and take Ellie somewhere new, somewhere without ghosts." "I'm sorry about your home," Willa said. "All your memories of Catherine, your life together." "Buildings burn," Rhett replied. "Memories remain." He studied her face in the firelight. What about you? What comes after Tate? Willa looked down at her sleeping son. Freedom, she said simply. A place where Jonah can grow up safe, where we don't have to look over our shoulders. She hesitated. I used to dream of going back east, teaching, perhaps, like my father wanted, but those dreams seem very far away now. Dreams have a way of changing, Rhett observed. Doesn't mean they're lost. Their conversation was interrupted by a sound from outside a branch, snapping, followed by the soft whicker of a horse. Instantly alert, Rhett moved to the window, peering cautiously through a gap in the shutters. In the dim moonlight, he could make out figures moving among the trees, at least 3 men on horseback, approaching slowly. Tate's men, Willa whispered, joining him at the window. Maybe, Rhett replied, reaching for his rifle. Or maybe Buckley ran into trouble and they followed him back. He checked the weapon quickly. Wake Samuel if you can. Get the children to the back of the cabin. As Willa hurried to comply, Rhett positioned himself near the door, rifle ready. The footsteps outside grew closer, then stopped. A moment of silence followed, broken only by the soft breathing of the children and Samuel's feverish murmuring. Then came a knock, firm, authoritative. Not Buckley's coded pattern. Morgan, a deep voice called. I know you're in there. Come out and let's talk like civilized men. Rhett froze. He knew that voice, had known it for over a decade. Who is it? Willa whispered from the back of the cabin. Elias Morgan, Rhett replied, his voice tight with disbelief. My father-in-law. Morgan. The voice outside the cabin called again. I don't have all night. Rhett exchanged a glance with Willa, then moved cautiously to the door, rifle still ready. How do I know it's really Elias Morgan? He called back. A short, humorless laugh came from outside. You think Tate's men would know to impersonate your father-in-law? Open the door, son. If I meant you harm, I wouldn't have announced myself. The logic was sound, but Rhett remained wary. Step back from the door. Hands where I can see them. After a moment's hesitation, the voice replied, Very well. Rhett opened the door a crack, peering out. In the pale moonlight stood a tall, distinguished man in his 60s, silver-haired and ramrod straight despite his age. Judge Elias Morgan had aged since Rhett had last seen him, but the stern, aristocratic features remained unmistakable. He held his hands out to his sides as instructed, revealing an expensive coat and the glint of a gold watch chain. Behind him stood 2 men, younger, hard-faced, both armed, but with weapons holstered. My security, Elias explained, noting Rhett's attention. These are dangerous times. How did you find us? Rhett demanded, not yet opening the door fully. I have resources. When a wanted man's homestead burns to the ground, people talk. Elias's keen eyes assessed his son-in-law. You look terrible. Been a rough day, Rhett replied dryly. Are you going to invite me in, or shall we conduct our business in the cold? Rhett hesitated, then stepped back, opening the door wider. Your men stay outside. Elias nodded to his guards, then entered the cabin alone. His gaze swept the interior, taking in Willa with Jonah Ellie asleep on the bunk, and Samuel's fevered form. I see the situation is as desperate as I feared, he remarked, removing his gloves. Why are you here, Elias? Rhett asked bluntly. We haven't exchanged 2 civil words since Catherine's funeral. I'm here because of her, Elias replied, nodding toward Ellie. My granddaughter deserves better than to die in a mountain shootout. No one's dying, Rhett said firmly. Really? Elias gestured toward Samuel. That boy seems to disagree. Infection, I assume. Willa stepped forward. Gunshot wound. The bullet passed through, but we lack proper medical supplies. Elias studied her with interest. You must be Mrs. Hart. the cause of all this trouble. That's one way of looking at it, Willa replied evenly. Indeed. Elias turned back to Rhett. I received no letter from any sheriff, if that's what you're wondering. My sources in Silverhorn reported the incident at your ranch. When I heard Ellie might be in danger, I came immediately. All the way from Denver. That's a 3-day ride. I was already in Boulder on business. Rode through the night when I received the telegram. Something like genuine concern flickered across the older man's features. Despite our differences, Rhett, she is my blood. What do you want? Rhett asked, still suspicious. To help, of course. Elias removed his coat, revealing an elegant suit beneath. I have a proposition. I'm listening. My carriage is waiting at the base of the trail. We can be in Boulder by morning, where a private train car will take us to Denver. From there, I can arrange safe passage east for all of you. East, Rhett's eyes narrowed. You expect me to run? I expect you to be sensible, Elias countered. This Tate fellow has the law on his side, now corrupted though it may be. Judge Reynolds has already signed the forfeiture order on your property. That's my land, Rhett growled. Mine and Ellie's. Catherine's legacy. It's dirt and timber, Elias said dismissively. Replaceable. Lives are not. He glanced meaningfully at the sleeping Ellie. And what do you get out of this arrangement? Willa asked suddenly. Elias turned to her, one silver eyebrow arched. Perceptive Mrs. Hart. Yes, there is a condition. He faced Rhett again. Ellie comes to live with me in Denver. Permanently. The words landed like physical blows. Rhett stared at his father-in-law, momentarily speechless. You want to take my daughter? He said finally, his voice dangerously quiet. I want to give her the life Catherine would have wanted for her. Elias corrected. Education, culture, safety. All the things you cannot provide while running from outlaws. Get out, Rhett said flatly. Don't be hasty. I said get out. Rhett's voice rose, causing Ellie to stir in her sleep. He immediately lowered it. You come here to my refuge and try to take my child, after everything we've been through. I'm trying to save her life, Elias hissed. And yours, though God knows why I bother. We don't need your kind of saving. Elias's face hardened. Still the same proud fool who let my daughter die. The accusation hung in the air between them, sharp as a blade. Willa stepped forward, placing herself between the two men. Judge Morgan, she said quietly, your granddaughter is safe with her father. Whatever your differences now is not the time to air them. She glanced at Samuel's feverish form. But if you truly want to help, we need medicine, bandages, food. Elias studied her for a long moment. You're not what I expected, Mrs. Hart. Few of us are, sir. A ghost of a smile touched the older man's lips. Indeed, he turned back to Rhett. My offer stands. Think on it overnight. I'll return in the morning with supplies. He moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, I never believed you let Catherine die intentionally. But your stubborn pride kept you from asking for help when she fell ill. Don't make the same mistake twice. With that, he departed, leaving the cabin in tense silence. Charming man, Willa observed dryly. He wasn't always like that, Rhett replied, still staring at the door. Catherine's death changed him, changed us both. Will he really help, if it serves his purpose? Rhett moved to check on Ellie, who had settled back into sleep. Elias never does anything without calculating the benefit. Including taking Ellie, Rhett's jaw tightened. That will never happen. Willa touched his arm gently. He's right about one thing. Samuel needs medicine soon. I know. Rhett ran a hand through his hair, weighing their limited options. If Elias brings supplies in the morning, we at least buy some time. And then what? Then we figure out how to end this, permanently. The night passed slowly. Samuel's condition worsened, his breathing becoming shallow, skin burning with fever. Willa did what she could with their limited supplies, but by dawn it was clear the young man was fading. As promised, Elias returned at first light, this time with a leather medical bag and a basket of provisions. He was accompanied by a third man, older, bespectacled, with the unmistakable bearing of a physician. "Dr. Wilson," Elias introduced him, "from my staff in Denver. He'll attend to the boy." The doctor moved immediately to Samuel's side, his experienced hands examining the wound while he muttered under his breath. "Septicemia," he announced grimly. "Blood poisoning. It's advanced." "Can you help him?" Willa asked. "Perhaps. I've brought medicines, quinine, morphine, carbolic acid, for cleaning the wound." The doctor glanced up at Rhett. "But he needs proper care in a hospital. This cabin is no place for serious medical treatment." "We have little choice, doctor," Rhett replied. "There's always choice," Elias interjected. He set the basket on the table. Food, coffee, clean clothing for the children. And this, he produced a folded newspaper, this morning's edition from Boulder. Rhett took the paper, scanning the headline, "Silverhorn Rancher Sought in Murder Case." Beneath was a crude sketch of his face and the offer of a $1,500 reward. "It'll be in every newspaper from here to Kansas City by week's end," Elias said. "How long before someone recognizes you?" "What do you suggest?" Rhett asked, though he already knew the answer. "My offer stands. Safe passage for all of you. With Ellie staying in Denver. With Ellie receiving the care and education her mother would have wanted," Elias corrected. "You would have visitation rights, of course." "The answer is still no." Elias sighed deeply. "I feared as much, which is why I've prepared an alternative." He withdrew an envelope from his coat. "Deeds to a property in Wyoming Territory. 400 acres of good grazing land near the Bighorn Mountains. Remote, defensible, far from Tate's influence." Rhett took the envelope cautiously. "What's the catch?" "No catch. The land is yours, free and clear." Elias glanced at Ellie, who was now awake and watching the proceedings with wide eyes. "In exchange, I ask only that you allow me to be part of my granddaughter's life, regular visits, letters, perhaps summers in Denver when she's older." The offer was unexpected, and Rhett's suspicion showed plainly on his face. "Why the change of heart?" "Because I'm an old man who has lost too much already," Elias replied, a rare vulnerability in his voice. "Catherine is gone. I don't wish to lose her daughter as well to either death or estrangement." Before Rhett could respond, Dr. Wilson called urgently from Samuel's bedside. "I need help here. The wound's hemorrhaging." Willa rushed to assist, holding Samuel down as the doctor worked to stop the bleeding. The young man thrashed weakly, his eyes rolling back. "Hold him," Wilson ordered, preparing a syringe of morphine. "This will ease his pain and slow his heart rate." As they struggled to stabilize Samuel, a new sound reached them from outside hoofbeats, multiple riders approaching at speed. "Are you expecting more visitors?" Elias asked sharply. Rhett moved to the window, peering out cautiously. What he saw made his blood run cold. At least 8 riders approaching through the trees, led by a familiar figure on a black stallion. "Tate," he said grimly, "and his men." "How did they find us?" Willa asked, her face paling. "Does it matter?" Rhett checked his rifle quickly. "Elias, get your men in here. We need every gun." The judge moved to the door, signaling his guards. They entered swiftly, weapons already drawn. "How many?" one asked. "8 that I can see," Rhett replied. Probably more hanging back. Dr. Wilson looked up from Samuel, his expression grave. This boy cannot be moved. Not now. No one's moving, Rhett assured him. He turned to Willa. Get the children to the back room. Stay low away from the windows. As Willa gathered Ellie and Jonah Elias, surprised everyone by producing a gleaming Remington revolver from beneath his coat. I may be old, he said, noting Rhett's expression, but I haven't forgotten how to shoot. I was at Shiloh, remember? On the opposite side, Rhett reminded him. Today, we're on the same side. Elias checked his weapon with practiced ease. For Ellie's sake, if nothing else. Outside, the riders had stopped just beyond rifle range. Tate's voice carried clearly through the morning air. Morgan, I know you're in there. I know the woman and children are with you. A pause. I also know Judge Morgan arrived last night. Quite a family reunion. How could he know that? One of Elias's guards whispered. He has informants, Rhett replied grimly. Probably followed Elias from Boulder. Come out and talk, Morgan, Tate called. Just you and me, man to man. Let's resolve this reasonably. There's nothing reasonable about burning my home, Rhett shouted back. A regrettable necessity. You left me little choice. Tate's voice remained calm, almost conversational. But I'm willing to be generous now. You and the girl can go free. I just want what's mine, my wife and son. From the back room, Willa's voice rang out. I was never yours, Emery, and neither is Jonah. A ripple of laughter ran through Tate's men. Their leader silenced them with a gesture. Is that any way to speak to your husband, Willa? Tate called. After all we've shared, you have 1 minute to leave, Rhett shouted, or we start shooting. Always violence with you, isn't it, Morgan? Tate sighed audibly. Very well, but know this. I have 20 men surrounding this cabin. No one leaves alive unless I say so. Inside, Rhett turned to Elias and his guards. He's bluffing about the numbers. I count 10 at most. Still poor odds, Elias observed. We have cover supplies. We can hold out. For how long? Eventually they'll rush us or smoke us out. Rhett knew his father-in-law was right. Even with the additional guns, they were outmatched. And with Samuel critically injured and 2 small children to protect, their options were severely limited. There might be another way, Elias said suddenly. A legal approach. This is hardly the time for a court case, Rhett replied dryly. Not what I meant. Elias lowered his voice. I know things about Judge Reynolds. Compromising things. Evidence of bribes, corruption stretching back years. How does that help us now? Reynolds is Tate's protection, his legal shield. Without him, Tate is just another outlaw with a price on his head. Elias's eyes gleamed with the cunning that had made him a formidable judge. I have the documentation in my saddlebags. Affidavits, financial records enough to not only remove Reynolds from the bench, but send him to prison. Again, how does this help us right now with Tate and his men outside? Because Tate doesn't know I have it, Elias explained. But if we could get word to him that I do, that his precious legal protection is about to collapse, he might be persuaded to negotiate genuinely. The idea had merit, Vet had to admit. How do we get that message to him? I'll go, Elias said simply. That's suicide. Not necessarily. Tate wants Willa and the boy, not an old judge. Elias straightened his vest. I still carry some authority. At the very least, I can buy us time. Before Rhett could protest further, Elias moved to the door. Cover me from the windows. If they shoot, make every bullet count. With that, he stepped outside, hands raised slightly at his sides, walking with the dignified bearing of a man accustomed to commanding respect. "Emery Tate," he called. "Judge Elias Morgan, I believe we should talk." Through the window, Rhett watched tensely as his father-in-law approached the mounted outlaw. Tate gestured for his men to hold their fire curiosity evident even at this distance. "What could you and I possibly have to talk about, Judge?" Tate's voice carried clearly. "Your future," Elias replied calmly, "and a proposition that might interest you." Tate considered this, then dismounted. "Come ahead, then." Slowly. As Elias approached Tate, Willa joined Rhett at the window, Jonah secured in his sling across her chest. "What is he doing?" she whispered. "Trying to buy us time," Rhett replied, "and maybe more." They watched as Elias and Tate conversed, too distant now to hear their words. The discussion appeared intense, with Elias doing most of the talking, and Tate listening with increasing interest. After several minutes, Tate called one of his men forward, issuing instructions. The man rode off at speed toward the east. "What's happening?" Willa asked. "I don't know," Rhett admitted. But Elias seems to have Tate's attention. The discussion continued for nearly 20 minutes before Elias turned and walked back toward the cabin, his pace measured unhurried. Tate remained where he stood, watching. When Elias re-entered the cabin, his expression was grimly satisfied. "Well?" Rhett demanded. "I've made a deal," Elias announced. "One that should get us all out of here alive." "Oh, what kind of deal?" "Tate has agreed to let us leave all of us, including Samuel, in exchange for the evidence against Reynolds." "And Willa and Jonah?" Rhett asked suspiciously. "That was the difficult part," Elias admitted. "Tate insists they remain, but—" He raised a hand as Rhett began to protest, only long enough for a formal divorce proceeding. "I convinced him that a legal separation, properly documented, would be more beneficial to him than taking them by force." "And he agreed to that?" Willa asked skeptically. "When I explained the alternative federal marshals investigating not only Reynolds, but his connection to the Snakes, yes, he agreed." Elias straightened his cuffs. "Tate is many things, but stupid isn't one of them. He recognizes when his position is untenable." "I don't believe it," Rhett said flatly. "Tate wouldn't give up that easily." "Who said anything about easy?" Elias replied. "I had to offer something substantial in return. The evidence against Reynolds, yes, but also non-interference in his business ventures going forward." "You're protecting an outlaw," Rhett realized. "I'm protecting my granddaughter," Elias corrected sharply. "And you and Mrs. Hart and that poor boy bleeding out on the bunk. Sometimes justice must be tempered with pragmatism." Before Rhett could respond, a shout came from outside. "Time's up, Judge," Tate called. "What's your answer?" Elias looked at Rhett intently. "We need to decide. Now." "It's a trap," Rhett insisted. "The moment we step outside, it's our only chance." Elias cut him off. "Samuel will die without proper medical attention. And how long before Jonah or Ellie falls ill in these conditions?" The truth of his words hung in the air. Rhett turned to Willa, whose face reflected his own doubt and fear. "What do you think?" he asked softly. "I think," Willa replied carefully, "that Emery never keeps his word. Not when it matters." She looked down at Jonah, then at Ellie, who watched wide-eyed from the back room. "But I also think we're out of options." Rhett nodded slowly, making his decision. "We accept the deal," he told Elias. "But I want your guards to take the children first. Get them to safety no matter what happens to the rest of us." "Agreed," Elias said without hesitation. "And one more condition," Rhett added, his voice hardening. "I want 5 minutes alone with Tate before anything is finalized." "That wasn't part of the arrangement," Make it part, Rhett insisted, or there's no deal. Elias studied his son-in-law for a long moment, then nodded. I'll see what I can do. As Elias returned outside to continue negotiations, Rhett moved to the bunk where Samuel lay, now mercifully unconscious from the morphine. Dr. Wilson looked up, his expression grave. He needs to be moved soon, the doctor said quietly. I've done what I can here. We're working on it, Rhett assured him. He turned to Willa, who stood cradling Jonah while keeping a watchful eye on Ellie. Whatever happens next, he said softly, stay close to Elias's men. If anything goes wrong, nothing will go wrong. Willa interrupted, though her voice lacked conviction. We'll all walk out of here together. Rhett wished he could believe that, but as he checked his revolver one last time, he couldn't shake the feeling that Emery Tate had something else in mind entirely. Outside, Elias's voice rose in what sounded like argument. Rhett moved to the window just in time to see Tate make a sharp gesture. Instantly, his men raised their rifles. It's a double cross, Rhett realized. Get down! The first shots shattered the cabin windows, sending glass flying. Rhett lunged for Willa, pulling her and Jonah to the floor, as bullets splintered the wood above them. Stay down, he shouted, crawling toward his rifle. Elias's guards returned fire from their positions, providing covering fire as Dr. Wilson dragged Samuel's unconscious form behind the overturned table. Ellie was screaming, terrified by the sudden violence. Where's Elias? Willa called over the gunfire. Rhett risked a glance out the broken window. His father-in-law lay on the ground, halfway between the cabin and Tate's position, clutching his leg, blood seeping through his fingers. Whether he'd been deliberately shot or caught in the crossfire was impossible to tell. He's hit, Rhett reported grimly. Leg wound. We have to help him, one of the guards insisted. Try it and you're dead, Rhett countered. Tate's men have the angle. Outside, the shooting paused momentarily. Tate's voice carried across the clearing. That was just a taste. Morgan, next volley won't be so gentle. Send out my wife and son, and the rest of you can walk away. He's lying, Willa said, her face pale but determined. He'll kill everyone. Rhett knew she was right. Tate had revealed his true intentions. The negotiations had been merely a ploy to get Elias out in the open, perhaps to eliminate the most powerful potential adversary first. We need a diversion, Rhett said, mind racing. Something to draw their fire while we get out through the back. The dynamite, one of Elias's guards suggested. From your supplies. Could rig it with a long fuse, throw it toward their position. Too risky, Rhett replied. We're as likely to bring the cabin down on ourselves. What about a fire? Dr. Wilson suggested unexpectedly. The clearing is dry. A well-placed blaze would create smoke confusion. Rhett considered this. It might work, but we'd need someone to start it. I'll go, the younger of Elias's guards volunteered. I'm fastest. And I'll provide covering fire, Rhett decided. The rest of you prepare to move out the back the moment the diversion starts. Head straight for the trees, stay low. What about Samuel? Dr. Wilson asked. You and Bates will carry him, Rhett instructed, nodding to the older guard. Willa, you take Ellie and Jonah. Stay between the men. What about Judge Morgan? Willa asked. Rhett's jaw tightened. I'll get him. The plan set, they worked quickly to prepare. The younger guard, Davis, filled his canteen with lamp oil and tore strips from a blanket for kindling. Rhett distributed the remaining ammunition, giving Willa his revolver. Remember what I taught you, he told her. 6 shots. Make them count if necessary. What about you? She asked, concern evident in her eyes. I'll be right behind you, he promised, though they both knew it might be a lie. When everything was ready, Rhett moved to the front window rifle positioned. Davis slipped out the back door, staying low as he circled toward the eastern edge of the clearing, where the underbrush was driest. "Tate," Rhett called, drawing attention, "let Judge Morgan go. He's badly wounded." "The judge made his choice," Tate replied coldly, "as did you when you harbored my wife. She's not your property. The law says otherwise." Tate's voice hardened. "Last chance, Morgan. Send them out, or we burn you out." "You'll have to come and get us," Rhett challenged, hoping to keep Tate's attention fixed on the front of the cabin. From his position, Rhett could just see Davis reaching the underbrush. The guard quickly emptied his canteen, then struck a match. The oil-soaked kindling caught immediately, flames racing through the dry grass. "Fire!" one of Tate's men shouted, spotting the blaze as it spread rapidly, driven by the morning breeze. "Now!" Rhett called to the others, as the flames grew, creating a wall of fire and smoke. Between Tate's men and the eastern side of the cabin, the escape party moved. Dr. Wilson and Bates, carrying Samuel Willa, hurrying behind with Ellie and Jonah. They slipped out the back door, staying low as they made for the tree line. Rhett provided covering fire, forcing Tate's men to keep their heads down. The diversion was working. The rapidly spreading fire had created confusion, with several riders struggling to control panicked horses. Through the smoke, Rhett could see Elias, still on the ground, now trying to crawl toward the cabin. Knowing his time was short, Rhett made his decision. Waiting until the escaping group had reached the relative safety of the trees, he took a deep breath and charged out the front door. Bullets kicked up dirt around him as he ran in a zigzag pattern toward Elias. Reaching the older man, he grabbed him unceremoniously and half-dragged, half-carried him toward the cabin. "Leave me, damn you!" Elias gasped, face contorted with pain. "Shut up and crawl!" Rhett grunted, returning fire one-handed to keep Tate's men at bay. They had almost reached the cabin when Rhett felt a searing pain in his left shoulder. The impact spun him around, but he maintained his grip on Elias, pulling them both the final few feet to shelter. Inside, Rhett leaned against the wall, breathing heavily. Blood soaked his shirt where the bullet had struck, but he could still move his arm, a graze painful, but not debilitating. "You're a fool," Elias said through gritted teeth, as Rhett examined his leg wound. "Probably," Rhett agreed, tearing a strip from his shirt to bind the wound. "Bullet's still in there, but it missed the artery. You'll live." "Why did you come back for me?" Elias demanded. "After everything, because you're Ellie's grandfather," Rhett cut him off. "And Catherine would never forgive me if I let you die." A complex emotion crossed Elias's face. "Where are the others?" "Making for the trees. We need to follow now." Rhett checked his rifle, only 3 rounds remaining. "Can you walk?" "With help," Elias admitted grudgingly. "Then let's go. Out the back, stay low." The fire had spread considerably now, threatening the cabin itself. Smoke provided additional cover as Rhett helped Elias through the back door and toward the tree line, both men hobbling, leaning on each other despite years of enmity. They had almost reached the trees when a figure emerged from the smoke before them. Emory Tate himself, revolver leveled at their chests. "Not so fast, gentlemen," he said, his handsome face twisted in a cold smile. "I believe you have something that belongs to me." Rhett raised his rifle, but Tate shook his head. Drop it, or I put a bullet through the judge's other leg." Reluctantly, Rhett lowered his weapon. "Willa and Jonah are gone, Tate. You've lost." "Have I?" Tate's smile widened. "My men are already circling the woods. They'll find them." He gestured with his revolver. "Now walk. Back to what's left of my camp." "The fire," Elias began, "is being contained," Tate finished. "Your little diversion bought some time, nothing more." With no choice, Rhett and Elias allowed themselves to be marched back toward the clearing, where several of Tate's men had indeed managed to check the fire's spread. The cabin, however, was now fully ablaze beyond saving. Tate forced them to sit on the ground near his horse hands bound behind them. "When my men return with Willa and the boy," he told Rhett, "you'll watch me take them away. That'll be your punishment. Living with the knowledge that you failed." "Why?" Rhett asked, playing for time, hoping against hope that Willa and the others had gotten far enough away. "Why this obsession? She left you. Move on." Tate's expression darkened. "No one leaves me, especially not with what's mine." "The boy," Elias realized aloud. "This is about the boy, isn't it?" "My son," Tate confirmed coldly. "My blood, my legacy." "Is that all children are to you?" Rhett asked. "Possessions, legacy," says the man who failed to protect his own daughter, Tate sneered. "Judge Reynolds told me all about you, Morgan. The famous Carolina ghost reduced to hiding in the mountains with another man's wife." Rhett said nothing, conserving his strength, watching for any opportunity. His shoulder throbbed, and he could feel blood still seeping through his shirt. Beside him, Elias's face was gray with pain, but the older man remained stoically silent. The minutes stretched on, the fire gradually dying down as it ran out of fuel. Tate paced impatiently, checking his pocket watch repeatedly. "They should have found them by now," he muttered, then called to one of his men, "Harris, ride out and see what's keeping them." As Harris mounted his horse, a shot rang out from the trees. The man tumbled from his saddle dead before he hit the ground. Tate and his remaining men immediately took cover, guns drawn. Rhett and Elias, still bound, could only watch, as another shot came from a different direction, dropping a second outlaw. "Sniper," one of Tate's men shouted. "Spread out," Tate ordered. "Find him." But before his men could move, more shots came not from a single shooter, but from multiple positions around the clearing. Methodical, precise fire that spoke of military training. "What the hell?" Tate snarled, crouching behind a fallen log. A familiar voice called from the tree line. "Emery Tate, this is Sheriff Thomas Buckley of Silverhorn. You're surrounded by federal marshals. Throw down your weapons." Hope surged through Rhett. Buckley had made it to Denver after all, returning with reinforcements. Tate, however, wasn't ready to surrender. "Kill the prisoners," he shouted to his men. "Then scatter." One of the outlaws turned toward Rhett and Elias, raising his rifle. Before he could fire, a shot from the trees took him in the chest. The remaining men, seeing their advantage evaporating, began to throw down their weapons. All except Tate. With a curse, he lunged toward Rhett, revolver drawn. "If I'm going down, you're coming with me, Morgan." Rhett, hands still bound, could only try to roll away. But before Tate could fire, another shot cracked across the clearing. Tate staggered, a look of surprise crossing his face as a crimson stain blossomed on his chest. He turned slowly toward the source of the shot. There, at the edge of the trees, stood Willa Rhett's revolver, steady in her hands, smoke still curling from the barrel. "That's for Joshua," she said clearly, "and for every person you've ever hurt." Tate took one step toward her, then collapsed to his knees. His revolver slipped from nerveless fingers as he toppled forward, face down in the dirt. Moments later, the clearing was swarming with men, federal marshals in their distinctive coats, moving efficiently to secure the surviving outlaws. Sheriff Buckley approached Rhett and Elias, quickly cutting their bonds. "Thought you might need a hand," the old sheriff said with a hint of a smile. "Your timing is impeccable," Elias replied dryly, wincing as Buckley helped him to his feet. "Willa," Rhett asked urgently, The children's Samuel, safe, Buckley assured him. About a mile east, guarded by marshals. Dr. Wilson is with them. He nodded toward Willa, who was being escorted back into the clearing by a marshal. Mrs. Hart insisted on coming back when she heard the shooting. Rhett moved toward her, his legs unsteady from blood loss and exhaustion. "You should have stayed with the children," he said, but there was no reproach in his voice. "I couldn't let him hurt anyone else," Willa replied simply. Her eyes fell to his bloodied shoulder. "You're wounded." "I've had worse." Their eyes held for a long moment all the unspoken feelings of the past days passing between them. Then Willa stepped forward, and mindful of his injury, wrapped her arms gently around him. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." Rhett returned the embrace with his good arm burying his face in her hair. "No, thank you for reminding me what it means to stand for something." 3 weeks later, Rhett stood on the porch of the half-rebuilt Morgan homestead, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains gold. His shoulder was healing well, though it still ached when the weather changed another scar to add to his collection, another story written on his body. Behind him, he could hear Willa inside her voice raised in song as she prepared dinner. Ellie's higher pitch joined in occasionally, the two voices twining together in a harmony that made something in his chest tighten with unexpected emotion. So much had changed since that night in the mountains. Judge Reynolds had been arrested on corruption charges, the evidence provided by Elias proving more than sufficient. Most of Tate's gang were either dead or awaiting trial. Sheriff Buckley had been commended for his bravery, though the old lawman seemed embarrassed by the attention. Samuel Freeman had survived thanks to Dr. Wilson's care and his own youthful resilience. He was staying with them now, helping with the rebuilding finding purpose in honoring his father's sacrifice. And then there was Elias. To everyone's surprise, the judge had chosen to remain in Silverhorn during his recovery, taking rooms at the hotel. He visited almost daily, his relationship with Rhett evolving from cold hostility to something approaching respect, if not yet warmth. More surprising still was Elias's relationship with Ellie. The little girl had taken to her grandfather, immediately climbing into his lap to show him her drawings or demand stories. And Elias, stern and formal in all other matters, melted completely in her presence. Footsteps on the path drew Rhett from his thoughts. Elias approached, walking with the aid of a carved cane, his injured leg still not fully healed. "Evening, Judge," Rhett greeted him. "You're just in time for supper." "I can't stay," Elias replied, taking the evening train to Denver. He climbed the porch steps carefully. "But I wanted to bring you these personally." He handed Rhett a leather portfolio. Inside were papers, legal documents bearing official seals. "What's this?" Rhett asked, though he had already begun to read the first page. "The deed to your land, first of all," Elias explained, "fully restored to your name with additional acreage to compensate for damages." He pointed to the second document. "And this is the formal dissolution of Willa's marriage to Tate, granted posthumously by the territorial court. She's legally free, her and the boy both." Rhett looked up, surprised. "How did you manage this?" "I'm still a federal judge," Elias replied, with a hint of his old arrogance. "I have some influence." "Thank you," Rhett said sincerely. "This means a great deal, especially to Willa." Elias nodded, his expression softening. "There's one more thing." He reached into his coat and withdrew an envelope. "From Catherine's personal effects. I've kept it all these years, but it belongs to you now." Rhett took the envelope with a sense of trepidation. Inside was a letter written in Catherine's flowing hand, dated just days before her death. It was addressed to him. "I'll give you privacy. Elias said, turning to go. No. Rhett stopped him. Stay, please. Together they sat on the porch steps as Rhett unfolded the letter with trembling hands and began to read. My dearest Rhett, if you're reading this, then I am gone, and you are shouldering a burden of guilt that I cannot allow you to carry. My illness came swiftly, too swiftly for anyone to prevent it. You must not blame yourself for being away when it struck. You were providing for our family as you have always done with honor and diligence. I need you to know that you gave me a life of joy and purpose. You think your past defines you, but I have always seen the goodness in your heart, the gentleness in your hands, the love in your eyes when you look at our Ellie. Promise me you won't close yourself off from life after I'm gone. Ellie will need you, all of you, not just the protective shell you sometimes retreat behind. And someday you may find room in your heart for new love. When that day comes, embrace it without guilt or reservation. It would bring me peace to know you and Ellie are happy. Until we meet again in that place where there is no more parting. All my love. Catherine Rhett folded the letter carefully, his vision blurred. Beside him, Elias cleared his throat, his own eyes suspiciously damp. She always saw the best in people, the older man said quietly. Even stubborn old men like me. And broken ones like me, Rhett added. Not broken, Elias corrected. Bent, perhaps, but not broken. He rose with the aid of his cane. I should go. The train won't wait. When will you return? Rhett asked, standing as well. Next month, perhaps. I'd like to see how the rebuilding progresses. Elias hesitated. And I promised Ellie I'd bring her a book about the stars. She seems quite fascinated by them. Like her mother, Rhett smiled. As Elias prepared to leave, Willa appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on her apron. Judge Morgan, won't you stay for dinner? There's plenty. Another time, Mrs. Hart. Thank you. Elias tipped his hat to her. Though I understand I may need to find a new name for you soon. Willa blushed slightly, glancing at Rhett. Nothing's been decided yet, Judge. Elias replied, not bothering to hide his skepticism. Well, when it is, I expect to be informed promptly. After he had gone, Willa joined Rhett on the porch. What did he mean by that? Rhett showed her the documents. You're free, Willa. Legally free. You and Jonah both. Her eyes widened as she scanned the papers. How did he? This would normally take months, even years. Apparently, being a federal judge has its advantages. Rhett watched her face, the play of emotions across her features as the reality sank in. You can go anywhere now. Do anything. The choice is yours. Willa looked up at him, her eyes reflecting the sunset gold. And if my choice is to stay here with you and Ellie, then I'd say I'm the luckiest man in Colorado Territory. Rhett took her hand gently. I'm not an easy man, Willa. The war left scars that may never fully heal. But if you'll have me, I'll spend every day trying to be worthy of you and Jonah. We're all scarred, Rhett, she replied softly. What matters is what we build from the broken pieces. She squeezed his hand. And I'd like to build something here with you. From inside the house came Ellie's voice calling them to dinner. Jonah's happy babbling joined in the sounds of family of home. As they turned to go inside, Rhett paused, drawing Willa close. That first night, when Ellie said you smelled like her mother, I never asked what she meant by that. Willa smiled. Perhaps you should ask her yourself. Later that evening, after the children were asleep and the house had settled into peaceful quiet, Rhett did just that. Sitting on the edge of Ellie's bed, he brushed a strand of hair from her sleepy face. "Ellie girl, can I ask you something? That night when Mrs. Willa first came, you said she smelled like Mama. What did you mean?" Ellie considered this with a child's serious contemplation. "Not her smell, Papa. Not like flowers or soap." She struggled to find the words. "More like the feeling when Mama used to hold me, I felt safe, like nothing bad could happen. And that's how Mrs. Willa makes you feel." Ellie nodded, her eyes already drooping with sleep. "She smells like home, Papa. Like where you belong." As Rhett kissed his daughter goodnight and quietly closed her door, he found Willa waiting in the hallway, having overheard the conversation. "Like home," she repeated softly. "That might be the nicest thing anyone's ever said about me." Rhett drew her gently into his arms. "She's right, you know. From that first night in the middle of a blizzard with wolves at our heels, somehow it felt like you were bringing something back, not taking it away." "And what was that?" Willa asked, her face tilted up to his. "The courage to live again," Rhett answered, lowering his lips to hers. "The courage to love." Outside, the first stars appeared over the mountains, bearing silent witness to the truth known by warriors since time immemorial, that there are many kinds of courage in this world, but none so powerful as the courage to open one's heart after it has been broken, to build a home from the ashes of what was lost, and to find in the scent of another's presence the unmistakable fragrance of belonging. Het van 5 Ketuk.